All right, so we're live here, guys. So this is what's going to be included in the video that'll be available afterwards. Just before we get going, I have a bunch of admin stuff, but the very first one I just want to mention is, and I think you guys are already on top of it, which is awesome. But just generally, if I'm kind of going through the slides and stuff, just stay on mute. You're welcome to ask a question at whenever you want, and the sort of mute unmute process is great because I can see that you switch off mute, so I know you want to ask something. But keeping it on mute while you're not talking is just really helpful because it keeps the camera on whoever's speaking. But with that said, we'll sort of jump into things here. So first off, there's the two teams. Like I said, I split it up because we had basically a big group of people this year. There's no difference between Team 1 and Team 2, so there's no Team 1 is not better than Team 2 and vice versa. Basically, all I tried to do was to split people from the same schools as much as possible. So if there's more than one person from your school, I did my best to put them on the other team. I find that's usually helpful because people have different, learn different things from the work that they do at school. And so, in my opinion anyway, you get more out of this program by sort of seeing what the other people in the program know and that sort of thing. So the first section here, everyone just, if you didn't get the PowerPoint or PDF slides, just let me know, and otherwise I'll keep going. Okay, so you guys are all good. So normally what I just kind of do, and I'm sure you guys are technically savvy enough to pull this off, but I normally just kind of have the slides going on one side, the hangout going on the other, and I'll try to reference the slide numbers as I go through for people that are watching this on the video afterwards. So the first section, is just some kickoff and admin stuff. So this is our first workshop, so just a few things I want to go through. I have the team leaders here on slide 3. It's going to be Josh and myself. It's basically going to be me for the most part. I'm going to be running this. There's a few people that do have some interest in working in sales and trading as well. And down the road, they might end up working with Josh on some of the mock interviews relating to technical S&T stuff. But for the most part, it's going to be me. I'm not going to go into my background now. I think I've talked to you guys enough about that during the interview process. And the next slides here on 4 and 5 are the rosters. So basically, we have 9 members on one team, 8 on this team, Team 2. At this point, I'll turn it over to everyone to let them just sort of give I go to the school, and maybe if you're doing an internship, and for the most part, you all want to get into investment banking, so that's going to be the same story for all of you guys. But a little, maybe one sentence about yourself, just so that everyone can get a quick intro. So I'll kind of go through the list on the slide here. So why don't we start it off with Ram?
So I'm studying at Concordia University, John Wilson School of Business in Montreal. Currently in the honors program in finance and working at Palomino Capital, which is a small private equity firm / alternative investments. Summer internship, and hopefully I'll get a shot at the investment banking gig.
All right, thanks, Ram. Boris, let's turn it over to you.
Hey guys, so I'm at McGill, but this summer I'm doing an internship in Toronto at Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, which is, I guess, one of the big pension funds in Canada, and hopefully for full time I'll be on the sell side. All right.
Right on. Ben, I don't think is here. Leslie's here, but he's having some mic and video difficulties today, so he's just listening in. So we'll get him next time, hopefully. Charles told me he might be late or might not make it. So Jonathan, why don't we turn it over to you?
Yes. So hi everybody. I'm doing my 3rd year of finance at Laval University at fall. So for now, I'm doing an internship at La Caisse, donc Caisse de dépôt et placement du Québec, in the private equity part.
Awesome. Thanks, John. So Samuel's not going to make it tonight either. So last one is Prasanth. Let's hear from you.
Hey everyone, my name is Prasanth. You could feel free to call me Praz for short. I'm doing my fourth year economics and specializing in finance. I'm at the University of Waterloo. I I am taking summer courses currently, but I actually interned at Verisk Analytics in New Jersey. So that's well, I was involved with the business team there. So hopefully I could get a pretty good internship coming up graduation. Yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Thanks, Praz.
Thank you.
And Sam, you just joined the call. We're just on the slide 5, going through intros. If you're there and you can hear, can I turn it over to you just to give a quick blurb on you and what you're doing right now, and just tell us, like everyone else, that you're trying to get a job in banking. Okay. Maybe maybe some connection issues there, but hopefully he can hear us. We'll carry on, and if we're able to hear from him, we'll let him do an intro later. Um, so just a note, guys, like the team structure, just to kind of make it. I personally find it nice to have the same group of people on the call each week. You kind of get to know each other a little bit. But generally, when it comes to leveraging this program and all it has to offer, there's no reason that you can't connect with the people from the other team as well. So on the Google sheet that I sent you guys earlier today, there is a sort of like a sign up sheet if you want to do go beyond the follow up peer-to-peer sessions. So there's always going to be one peer-to-peer session that I've organized the partners for, and you'll see that in the doc as well. But if you want to go beyond that and do a second one, so maybe you want to do a second fit mock interview or a second technical mock interview or whatever, you can just add your name to that list, and then if anyone else is interested, they'll basically reach out to you, and you can set something up. So don't when it comes to that stuff, don't restrict yourself to either team. Now, just this is the first session, so I just wanted to kind of cover some admin stuff before moving on to the actual content for tonight's session, which is networking. So, like I mentioned, I did send out that Google sheet earlier today. That's pretty much going to have most of the administrative stuff that you need to know for this whole program. So it has the contact information for everyone on both teams. It's going to have who you're meeting with after each workshop for the peer review. It's going to have the links to the video recordings of each session. So if you want to watch this afterwards, or if you miss a session, you want to watch it, it'll be there. Basically, everything's going to be in that one document. The only stuff that won't be there will be some of the materials that I send across just prior to each workshop. So like today, I sent you guys a couple documents to work with, and I'll be doing that for the most part for each of the sessions. Going forward, I'm always going to split Team 1 and Team 2 onto different nights. So I encourage, and I'll send you invites to both. So just so you know, you don't need to attend both. Hey Charles, how's it going? I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I can't hear you. But I'll keep going for now, and maybe we can hear from you later. Um, sorry, I kind of lost my. Oh yeah, so I was just saying I'll send you guys an invite to both for both teams, and I encourage you to go to your own team's workshop if you can. But if you can't, just decline that one and accept for the other teams. I'd rather you be able to attend one if you can't attend yours. So, anyways, that's just my word on that stuff. This is going to be recorded, like I said, and the link will be in the Google Sheet. This session's a little bit different, so this workshop's a little bit different than the other ones in that there's no follow-up with any of the peers on your team or with myself. So we're going to tell you, or I'm going to tell you basically to do a bunch of stuff, and I'm going to give you a bunch of hopefully useful information tonight. But the responsibility for implementing it and actually putting it to use is all yours. So I hope that you do it, but there just a note that it is a little bit different in that regard. Following the second workshop, you're always going to have 2 follow-ups. So basically, you'll have a follow-up with one of your peers, and that's going to be, like I said, you can see who you're connecting with each time in the Google sheet that I distributed. And basically, in terms of procedure, we'll have the workshop. Then hopefully, right after or early the next day after the workshop, you should try to connect with the person that you're partnered with and set up a time to meet. And once you've set up that time, then you want to individually reach out to me and say, hey, I'm meeting with so-and-so at this time. Jay, when do you want to meet? And the idea is always that, you kind of test out whatever we're working on with, someone else from the team first. And then, you go in with me. And so you get to incorporate what you learned from each other before you have a chance to work with me. So that's kind of the procedurally how it works. I recommend you guys use Google Hangouts or Skype for all your peer interactions. It's just nicer to have video. I think it makes for a more personable experience, and kind of feels like you're actually talking to a person instead of just kind of talking to a robot on the other side of the phone or on the other line. So that's my note there, and that's pretty much it for the admin items. On slide 7, I just go over the curriculum. So I think you guys have sort of seen something like this before in the materials that was on the website, but here it is in stone. This is what we're going to cover each week over the next couple months, and it's been designed so that the last session kind of lines up with when people might be going through early recruitment, and definitely you'll be able to finish it before standard recruitment starts in September. And even when the sessions end, obviously the program keeps going. It's more of a one-on-one type of thing at that point because basically I'm helping you through recruitment. So still doing mock interviews and sort of coaching you through the recruitment process and any issues you have. So oh yeah, and finally on slides 8 and 9 here, I have some nice warnings for everyone. The first one is resumes, okay? And then the first bullet, I have my nice bullet here, my nice euphemism. So some of you have a high degree of potential in your resumes, okay? Which basically means your resumes need a lot of work. The fact that you're here means I like you and you have that potential. But I really recommend that you sort of conform to the standards before next week's session because you want to get the most out of the peer review and the review with me as possible. So that's why I sent out the template in the email today. And basically my advice is if you haven't used the current version of your resume to actually successfully get a capital markets job before, then take whatever you have now and conform it to the standard that I sent out, okay? It's just, I think it'll make your life easier. It's going to just make it way more simple. But yeah, do make sure that it conforms. And in the strap box at the bottom here, I just have this ultimate key thing to remember, which is resumes are 1 page, okay? Never more than 1 for investment banking or sales and trading ever for entry-level jobs. So if you do have a multi-page resume, you got to cut it down. So that's the first warning. The second warning is for technical questions, and some of this, the people on both teams, they have varying levels of exposure and practice when it comes to technical questions. So some of you are doing investment banking internships right now. Some of you have never applied for an investment banking interview before. So obviously the level of prep is different. But if you're one of the people that knows that you need to put in a lot of work, don't wait until workshop 4 in late August to get started. Okay, do get going now. There's a bunch of ways that you can do this. Tomorrow I'll be setting up the IncuBanker memberships for all of you, so you'll be able to start accessing that. And to toot my own horn a little bit, I think that's basically most of what you'll need to prep for technical questions. There's a lot of great material there, but there's other resources you can use as well, right? So the Vault Guide, which most of you will have access through your school's admin, and also, frankly, Googling investment banking interview questions can yield a lot of information, or at least that's what I used to do. was vault in that. But now if I were you, I'd probably use the Inky Banker for the most part. I think it's pretty convenient. But anyways, so that kind of wraps up all the admin stuff. Is there any questions on what we're going to cover? The warnings, the general stuff we're going to go through in the course from any of you guys? All good? Okay. Beauty. So I'll move on then to the actual content for tonight's discussion, which is networking. So the first slide here, slide 11, I just want to talk a little bit about why networking is actually important. And basically, the key thing to remember is that everyone on this team, everyone on the other team, and frankly a lot of other people have resumes or applications that could be selected for jobs. Okay, when I say could, it means they have the right grades, the right experience, the right extracurricular activities, whatever. They have what it takes to be selected. But basically, there's not much you can do to actually change the odds of you being selected for an interview, right? The one thing basically that you can do is to talk to the person that's going to screen your resume, right? That one single act is probably the action that will have the most dramatic change in your odds of getting an interview. And if you just think about it, from the perspective of the person that's screening the resumes, let's say you have a stack of 100 and you narrow it down to 20 people that all kind of have, what it takes. If you've only met 2 of them, then you're just going to be way more likely to pick those 2 people for interviews than the other 18. Obviously, if you like them, that's always like an important caveat. You can't just meet the person, you have to leave a good impression. But basically what you're doing is you're giving them one more data point about you that they won't have for some of the other candidates. So anyways, that's kind of high level why this is so important. Obviously, it's great to learn about the industry and to learn about the people that you're meeting with. Those are sort of nice to have when it comes to networking. But you guys are networking with a very specific purpose, which is to get a job. And this is why it's so important, is because you can actually change the odds. So on the next slide here, slide 12, here I want to talk a little bit about who to actually contact. Okay, so you guys know you have to network. You know that's important. You know it can change the odds. I talked about that enough. But who do you actually need to reach out to? And basically, to explain this, I'll kind of give you a little bit of background about how the hiring process actually works behind the scene, at the other side of the table, which is, the big banks, basically. So the way hiring works is they basically have one key person responsible for hiring, and that person is called the staffer. Okay, so the staffer is basically a mid-level investment banker. So they're not an HR person. Their day job is to do investment banking, and on top of their kind of day job, they're also basically a manager for all analysts and associates. So they are responsible for hiring, for firing, for doing performance reviews, all that kind of stuff. And they're important to you because they're usually the ones that actually sign the offer. So that's obviously important. You need you need someone to sign, and they're the ones to do it. Okay, so under them, just like all good investment bankers, the staffers try to give all their work to other people to do it for them, right? And so the way it kind of works is the staffer will usually delegate a lot of the responsibilities to a group of associates, okay? And these people are usually called like a captain, a school captain. And there might be 1 or 2 of them for each school. If you go to a smaller school, yours might be lumped into a group of schools. So, if you go to Ivy, there's definitely someone who's responsible for Ivy. If you go to Laval, you might be going through, you might be lumped in with a group of schools, okay? But there will be some captain who's responsible for that grouping or geographic region or whatever. So anyways, the key point here is that basically, because Canada is a small place in the sense that, 5 banks or 6 banks are responsible for the vast majority of the jobs, you can pretty much reach out to 12 people, or even you don't need to do 2 at each bank, so 6 people. And if you reach out to them and talk to them and make a good impression, you've basically like significantly improved the odds of you getting an interview. Again, with the caveat that they have to like you, right? If you make a bad impression, then you just significantly decrease your odds of getting an interview. Um, but in any case, I think that kind of gets the point across. So on the next slide here, how to get to the school captain or staffer. Um, Here, there's this advice that I give whenever you're trying to reach out to someone in particular. So the first thing you want to do is leverage any connections. Okay, obviously, if you know them, then reach out to them. Right? If you already know the staffer because they're a family friend, or you worked for the firm in a different group, but you somehow came across them, obviously you go straight to them, right? Second best is if you know someone who's a second degree connection. So maybe you don't know the captain for your school at, let's say, TD, but you know someone who works at TD who's an analyst at TD, and that analyst at TD knows the person, your captain. So reach out to them, meet with them, and then ask them who the person responsible is for your school. Okay, that's the second best one. The third option is, maybe you don't know anyone, right? Which is going to be the case for many of you. And if you don't know anyone, then basically you're going to use LinkedIn to find people. Okay, and you want to basically, you don't need to necessarily find out who the staffer or who the captain is at each bank through LinkedIn. Okay, it's not going to say that in their profile. So all you're going to do is you're going to use LinkedIn to talk to literally any analyst or associate at the bank that you're targeting. And preferably you should target associates. Always go for associates first. But if you can't track or nail down an associate, an analyst is fine as well. So on that note, I mentioned using LinkedIn, and that's sort of going to make a nice segue for switching into the next section, which is how to use LinkedIn as a search tool. Before I do that, are there any questions, relating to staffer, captain, relationship, any of the other material that we covered? Everyone's good? Okay, cool. So now let's move on to using LinkedIn as a search tool. So I'm not sure how familiar you guys or how often you guys have used this in the past, but LinkedIn's search function is actually extremely powerful, and it's really great for finding people to fulfill your objectives. The reason being that in investment banking and sales and trading as well, basically everyone has the same title. So it's not like other industries where there might be 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever different ways of writing the person's title. In investment banking, everyone's an analyst or an associate, right? All the people you want to reach out to, and that just makes your life a lot easier. So if you go to slide 16, if you've never used the advanced function in LinkedIn, this is what it looks like. Next to the search bar when you're logged into LinkedIn, there's a little option to choose advanced, and this is what pops up. And even if you've never done this before, I'm sure you've done an advanced Google search or something like that, and basically, the same logic applies. You have a bunch of different fields which you can fill in to narrow your search. Okay, so the way to use this is to use a couple of the most powerful fields for you. So those include the degree of the connection. So you can see at the top in the middle there you can choose first degree connections, second degree connections, and beyond. You usually don't want to include first degree connections, so that's the only one that you should not click. The whole purpose of this is you're trying to find someone you don't know. If you're already connected to them, then you know them already. For the title, you can use associate, so that's what you should put for the most part. You can also enter the company, right? You can enter the company's name, and this is actually how I recommend you do this, is do this one at a time for at least the big 6 banks, or if you're applying for jobs in New York or London or whatever, do it for the bulge bracket banks. but do it one at a time because you want to find someone who actually is from that firm. And then also you can choose which school they went to, right? So particularly for people, the guys that are on the call today that are from core schools. So, if you're from McGill or you're from Queens or you're from Ivy or whatever, there's obviously going to be tons of people that went to the same school as you. So definitely use that first. If you're from a smaller school, you can still try it, okay? See if you get a hit. If you do, that's great. If you don't, then just delete it and just reach out to anyone, basically. Okay, so and the last thing is the location, right? So if you're looking for jobs in Toronto, enter Toronto. If you're looking for Montreal or you're looking for Vancouver or New York, whatever, you can enter the city there, and then you're only gonna get those people. So you can see how this can be really, really powerful, right? Like if you're systematically trying to find the associates at each investment bank in Canada, you can just go through, leave most of the fields the same, and change the company one at a time. National, CIBC, TD, Scotia, RBC. It's that simple, and you're going to get the exact people that you're looking for. Most bankers do have a LinkedIn profile, so after you do the search, you're pretty much going to get exactly the people that you want to reach out to. So it's a really great tool. So now the next step, now that you've actually found these people, is to reach out to them, right? So you want to connect. So how do you do that? Well, LinkedIn actually doesn't like that you do this, right? They prefer that you only add people that you already know, but basically it's just too good of a tool to ignore. So we're gonna ignore their rules. But when you reach out to them, if you've ever added someone on LinkedIn before, there's always an option to select how you know the person. Choose friend. Okay, it's the only one that doesn't require additional information to be entered from your part. Some people think that's weird. I'm reaching out to some professional who I've never met before and claiming to be their friend. Trust me, they either won't notice or won't care. People that work in the industry have people adding them on LinkedIn all the time. It's not weird. They're not going to get upset about it. They're just either going to, accept your invite or not. But the fact that you mentioned you selected them as friend isn't going to have any impact on that. And the other thing that you want to make sure that you do is don't use the standard text that LinkedIn uses when you add someone. So I'm sure you guys have seen it says something like, hi, I'd like to add you to my network on LinkedIn or something like that. You don't want to use that. You want to change it up because you want it to catch their attention. Okay, and ideally, you want to customize it to the person that you're reaching out to. It depends kind of on how much time you have. Maybe you have tons of time and you're able to go through each person that you reach out to's profile, learn all about them, and give a perfect little blurb here. Maybe you don't have that much time and you just need to make something that sounds different than the standard LinkedIn one, but is still applicable to pretty much any investment banker. The option's kind of yours. But in any case, here's kind of an example of what you might write if you're trying to reach out to me. So basically, if you go through the text here on slide 17, it's basically referencing stuff that's available from my LinkedIn profile, right? So that's one key thing that's in there is you want to have something to connect with them. If you're being a little bit more generic, it could just be like, hey, I'm really excited to talk to you because I'm trying to break into investment banking and you've obviously done well in the industry or something like that. And the other thing that's really important to accomplish here is to specifically say that you want to meet with them. Okay? It's really important that that's in the blurb that you send to them. And on the next slide, slide 18, I kind of go through some of the reasons. And the critical thing in terms of saying that you want to meet them is that you want to kind of create the perception that if they hit accept, they're basically accepting to meet you, right? Like you don't know this person, they don't know you, but you're reaching out to them on LinkedIn, and right from the start, you're saying, I'm reaching out because I want to meet you. So if they don't want to meet you, they should basically decline, right? And this is just going to make your life easier because when we get to the follow-up, you're just going to say, well, hey, as I mentioned, I reached out to you to meet you, so now let's meet, right? So that's kind of what the most critical part of that little blurb. Um, so, um,
I just have a
oh,
question.
yep, yep.
Yeah. So if it's in a different city, would you ask for a Skype call or would you just like regular call? Because I feel like a Skype call would be kind of difficult to set up, but
Yeah,
it would be more of like a meeting type thing.
yeah. So I wish that Skype was more acceptable because it'd be way nicer if you could actually see the person. But the reality is, if you're out of town, it's going to be a phone call. They're not going to do Skype because they're going to probably be in the office and they probably, can't even legally have Skype going because there's going to be private documents and that kind of thing. So yeah, it'll be a phone call. Uh, the other thing I would mention is if you are trying to work in another city, like you're in one city, you're trying to work in the other, if you can, make the trip for 2 days or whatever, and just try to meet as many people as possible during those 2 days, that can be a really valuable experience. The not, I you can do a lot by phone, but just nothing compares to meeting in person. And also, just the odds of people saying yes are greater when you say, hey, I'm going to be there on August 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Are you available to meet? And the fact that you're traveling to go there shows that you're serious, and people will be more likely to meet you. I think
Thanks.
that answers your question.
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other questions, guys, before I continue? Everyone's good? Okay, cool. So now we sort of got through the first part, which is reaching out on LinkedIn. You do your little customized blurb or whatever. Uh, the next thing that's going to happen, hopefully, right, is that they hit accept. Okay, and you're going to get a little notification on your LinkedIn app or or by email or whatever, saying that they accepted your connection. And at that point, it's really important to follow up as soon as possible. Okay, so 24 hours should be a maximum, and ideally it's less than an hour or even right away. Okay, and the reason this is so important is that just people that work in capital markets are so busy, right? And you kind of caught their attention, right? They might have read your little blurb and they're like, oh, okay, this kind of sounds interesting. They hit accept, so they're giving you a small signal that this might lead to something, right? But in a day, they're going to forget, right? They're going to go the next day. They're going to work a 20-hour day, and people are going to be screaming at them to do this and do that and whatever, and you're going to be out of mind. And so following up really quickly is really important, and you're just kind of trying to keep the momentum. So in that follow-up, okay, now you have them as a connection on LinkedIn, which means you can write them a regular message, right? There's no character limit, and there's a couple things that you want to do in that follow-up message. So on the next slide, on 19, I have like a sample follow-up message, like following up on the blurb that I had before. And in that, you want to do a couple things. So you want to remind them that you reached out to them specifically to meet with them, right? So you want to say, hey, something like, hey, as I mentioned in my connection request, I'm really interested in meeting with you. Okay. You can say, extend a little bit on why you reached out to them. So this is the little bit of buttering them up a little bit, saying, hey, I think your profile looks really interested, and I think I could learn a bunch from you. You can dig into that a little bit deeper here because you have more space. And then the last thing, which is the most important thing, is that you have to give them a few options to meet with you or have a call, right? So having been on the other side of the table for this when people are reaching out to me and trying to meet me for coffee or whatever, there's nothing more painful than having to go back and forth with 3 emails to try and set up a time, right? I'm doing a favor for the person that I'm meeting with, so I don't want to have to spend a lot of time trying to navigate this other person's schedule. So the way that you resolve that, and this is at the bottom part of the paragraph that I have on slide 19, is you just give them a few options, right? So you say, hey, I'm available Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday afternoon, if you are to meet for coffee. And you can even include a location, right? Like some people think this is weird, but the reality is all the 4 of the big 5 banks are at the same intersection, right? So look up a Starbucks that's close to them and say, hey, I can meet you at this Starbucks at one of these times. And by doing that, you just make it super easy for them to say yes, right? All they need to do is match up one of those times, and if any of those times work, they can just say yes, okay? And then you're in, and you have your meeting. So that's the critical thing for this follow-up message. And then, obviously, if they do say if they say yes, let's meet at this time, you should always follow up with a calendar invite. Bankers love that stuff. They need to book it in their schedule to remind themselves, and it's just nicer if somebody else does it for them. So say thank you and flip them the calendar request right away, and then you're basically in. So that's kind of my note on the LinkedIn stuff. Any questions on that process?
Yeah, Jay, I had a question.
Sure.
So what's their incentive to like coming out and meeting you? I mean, like you're reaching out to them and asking for their advice and whatnot, but like I mean, they have to do the extra work of, going to that nearest Starbucks or nearest wherever you wanted to meet them and like, what's their incentive? Like why would they want to come meet you? Like how could you attract that?
Yeah, good question. Lots of people ask me this, and there's actually a lot of people that when they're doing networking for investment banking, they get the advice that, oh, you need to bring something to the table. You need to add value to them. You need to follow up and say, hey, here's 3 things that are gonna really help you or something, right? I'm not really a huge believer in that. I think it's actually hard to do, and I think that's more applicable to networking outside of specifically targeting a job. Like you're networking because you want a job in September. Like that's the hands down the end of the story, right? So but to answer your question, they have a few incentives. One is very simple. They get to leave their desk 100-hour weeks, and they love to go for coffee to get an hour away from the office or whatever. So, you're welcome. You just help them out with escaping from, a grueling work week. Beyond that, there can be value for people for actually, suggesting someone who's a good candidate, right? So, if back when I was at Scotia and I was a captain for all the Rotman students, if I found someone that I thought was really good, I might tell the staffer, right? I might tip the staffer off, hey, staffer, I just met with this guy. He's really great, and I really think we should interview him. And if that person ends up getting hired, it is going to reflect well on me, right? So there can be some value provided to the other person. And finally, it might be their job, right? The captain, it's basically part of their job description to do this sort of thing. So, again, going back to my time at Scotia when I was working as a staffer, or sorry, as the captain for Rotman, if someone reached out that was a Rotman student and wanted to learn about investment banking, it was basically assumed that I would meet with them, right? Like if I was just like, oh no, I don't meet with people for coffee, the staffer as well as other of my coworkers would be like, dude, what are you doing? You're supposed to be like helping promote our brand and attracting top candidates, right? And the final thing I would just with that is, it's an industry of filled with people with lots of personality, right? So they like to meet with people and learn their perspectives, and maybe they just benefit from a good conversation. So uh, maybe my final point on that is, you're not providing something super material, okay? You're not going to change their life. You're not going to make them go home at 8 p.m. instead of 10 p.m. tonight, which is probably like the only thing that would make their lives better. But that doesn't mean that they don't enjoy it and that they're not going to do it, right? This is a whole world of giving back, and most people are willing to be a part of that.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Cool. Any other questions, guys, on the LinkedIn stuff? No. Okay. So on the next two slides here, 20, 20 and 21, I just wanted to mention a couple other things that are important to remember with regards to recruitment. So the first is with regards to previous interviews. So if you've done investment banking interviews, particularly for summer internships, right, and didn't get the job, then unfortunately it's not very fun, but you do have to go back to the people that you interviewed with, or whoever was responsible for kind of navigating you through that process, and connect with them and update them, right? And basically you need to say, you need to give them some sort of version of, hey, it was great meeting with you last time. I'm sorry things didn't work out, but I really think I'm ready for full-time, recruitment because of whatever, right? You need some change. Things are different now than they were before because of whatever. And the reason you just kind of have to do this, it's just, it's really a Canadian thing. There's a limited number of banks in Canada that are responsible for most of the jobs, and if you're sort of written off at one of the big 5 or 6 banks, then it's a serious blow to your odds of getting a job anywhere. So anyways, the key is to prevent them from doing the easy thing, which is to say, hey, we already interviewed this person and said no, so why would we interview them again? So you want to be proactive and try to prevent them from sort of going down that thought process. The other thing I want to mention is just in regards to early recruitment. So this is becoming or has become a real popular objective for most of the big banks in Canada. And basically what it means is people are recruiting people before formal job postings are made. So before you can apply through your school or the website, the banks themselves are seeking out people to interview and trying to interview them and sign them before recruitment officially really begins. Okay, so in practice, the way this actually works is the banks usually go through, they have a couple tools, but the main one is they'll actually just go through the entire book of resumes for some core programs. Okay, so usually that means, Ivy for sure. It could be at Queen's and McGill as well. But they'll just go through like literally the entire class of Ivy students, including people that don't work in or that have no interest in going into investment banking, and they'll try to find the who they think are the top investment banking candidates are, reach out to them, maybe have a social event, and then interview them. So if you're at one of those core schools, that's good. It means you have a shot, right? It means basically means you have a shot without having to do any work on your own, right? If you don't go to one of those schools, it means you literally have 0% chance of getting an early recruitment interview unless you take some action on your own, okay? And even if you do go to one of the core schools, it's just like, my previous advice, the odds are way higher if you reach out to people, so you should still be doing it. The sort of critical thing here is, as you're going through your networking that I've described, or in previous slides, you just need to ask one more question, which is, do you do any early recruitment? Okay, that's not an aggressive question. You're not asking, can I have an early recruitment interview, right? It's just, do you guys do early recruitment? And if they say yes, then obviously you're going to follow up and say, how do you get involved, or how do you participate in that? And if they like you, they're probably going to answer their question, right? They're going to give you the information you need, or they're going to pass your name on to whoever is doing early recruitment. But in any case, this is something you need to do a little homework on, and it can be really great, right? Like obviously, if you guys can have a job secured in August before everyone else is even applying, that's a huge win. And that actually happened to a few people that were on the team last year. They managed to go through early recruitment, and they were hired before September even came around. So it's definitely worth checking out. You guys are all good? Okay. So the next section is tips for informational interviews. So these are just sort of six. Once you've actually gone through this process, right? You've reached out to people on LinkedIn. You've sent them the follow-up message. You've set up the meeting, and now you're actually going to meet with them in person. So what do you want to do? Well, for some people this comes naturally. For others, it's more difficult. But to me, these are six important things to keep in mind when you're going through. The first is to articulate your objectives. Very important. You want to tell the person that you're meeting with what you want out of the discussion, and you want to do it at the beginning of the meeting. Okay, if you ask for something at the end, it feels really weird, right? Like you guys are just getting up to leave, and you're like, oh, by the way, could you help me with this? It feels really forced. But if you do it at the beginning, it actually is really helpful because then they know what to talk about. So maybe you're saying, hey, I know you went to a non-core school, so one of the things I'm trying to get out of the meeting today is, how did you, make it through the recruitment process being from a non-core school, and, what were the issues you came across, okay? One of them that's going to be in there for all of you is to find out who's responsible for hiring for your school, okay? So in the last workshop with the other team, someone said, hey, when you're meeting with someone, how do you ask for the staff or ask for the captain without sort of sounding strange or forced or too aggressive? And the answer is you just want to say, who's responsible for the hiring from my school? Okay, it's an easy question. Again, it's not aggressive, and if they don't already know the answer, it should be easy for them to find out, and they'll usually do that for you. Okay, so that's got to go. Those that and maybe something else like the first example I mentioned should go in, pretty much following your elevator pitch. Because normally they're going to say, hey, Leslie, tell me a little bit about yourself. And you're going to go through you're walking me through your resume, your little pitch or whatever. And then you're going to end with, and, I reached out to you today with the hope that I can, get this and this. The second bullet, present yourself with confidence. Okay, having gone through like interviewing you guys for this program, most of you guys don't struggle with this, but generally, you have to remember that investment banking is a sales job, right? So all they do all day is they sell, 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 and they try to make their bank look better than every other bank when they're pitching for business, and they expect you to do that with yourself too. So, if you have a rough patch of grades somewhere, or you went through recruitment before and you weren't successful, don't dwell on that. Like you don't want to present yourself as someone who's failed and struggled in the past. It's always got to be victories. I got this internship and it was great because it taught me this and that. You always have to find a way to spin your story to sound positive. And just having had a bunch of coffee sessions with people that are kind of really on their last legs when it comes to applying, they've applied a million times and they're kind of worn out and depressed about it. That's not a fun conversation to have, right? Like I'm leaving my day and I'm gonna go talk to someone and they're basically whining about all the difficulties they've had. Not a good way to create an impression. So the third bullet point. Prevent autopilot responses. By this, what I'm talking about here is you don't want to ask super standard questions, okay? And I have a little bit of empathy for you guys, especially when you're doing this for the first time, because some of the questions you just need to ask at some point, right? You're going to want to know about the hours, and you're going to want to know about the lifestyles like, and that's what everyone else is going to ask. So you can do that, especially when you're with the very first people that you're meeting with, but you also want to ask questions that are a little bit different, okay, or that so things like maybe about the culture of the firm's groups. Like for instance, when I was at Scotia, I worked in diversified for a little bit, and then I worked in M&A. Like if you ask me, hey, how did your life change when you switched groups, or why did you switch groups, or whatever. It's just something a little bit different than like a question that any other investment banker could answer, right? It's specific to the person, and those are really helpful for keeping this engaged. And if you fail to do that, the problem is, the people on the other side of the coffee table, they do this so often that if you don't ask them, interesting questions, they can just talk because they've just done this so many times. They can just go on their spiel, right? Like I can remember sometimes I'd sit down with someone and the person has clearly not prepared. They don't have anything really to ask me, and now I'm stuck in this awkward situation where I'm the only one talking. But I can basically mentally check out and talk for 45 minutes because I've done the same thing over and over again. But that's not good for you, right? Because it means I'm not going to remember who you are. I'm not going to get anything positive out of it. So that's the whole theory behind preventing autopilot responses. The fourth point here, establish a personal connection. It's just really nice if at some point during the meeting you can have a discussion relating to anything other than work or school. Okay, and this is a lot of people find this really hard to do. You kind of see yourself in the junior role here, right? They're the ones that have the job that you want, and you're sort of trying to get stuff from them. Like sort of like Praz was saying, what do I offer to them, and it can make it feel a little weird. But there's a couple ways that you can make it easier. One is if you're meeting in person. Normally when you go for a coffee or whatever, there's a few minutes while you're waiting in line where you're not going to talk about business stuff, just because it's a little bit weird to start having like the full-on like informational interview in line. There's noise, you're moving around, you have to make your order, you're going to be interrupted, so you can't really start. And that's a great time to be like, hey, what did you do on the weekend, right? Or if it's a Friday and lots of investment bankers like to party on Thursday nights, did you go out yesterday? Were people going out, or were people super busy? Little things like that to get some kind of like chit chat going is really helpful. And the other thing you can do is when you're going through your elevator pitch, you can do a quick, include a few like interests. So just like your resume ends with a few interests, throw that in at the end as well. So there's something. If any of those interests that you mention resonate with them, maybe they'll talk about it. So, if you're a golfer or whatever, and you say, hey, and when I'm not at work and I'm not at school, I'm a huge golfer, and I just, went to California for vacation, and I did, went to a bunch of different spots and golf. If they're a golfer, they may very well just jump on that opportunity to talk to you about golf, and maybe you'll spend the entire rest of the conversation talking about golf, which maybe will feel weird to you, but if you're talking about something that's keeping their interest and keeping their mood positive, then that's a win. So those are a couple ways to do that. The fifth one here, I call it burn it out before it fades away. This is super important, and it's another one that's many people struggle with. You have to end the conversation, okay? It's your job to end it and not waste their time. It's not their job. And it's really hard to have a 2-hour conversation with someone that you meet for the first time and keep it going. So if they said they're going to meet with you for half an hour, when you're getting close to the end of half an hour, it's your job to wrap it up. And the silver bullet solution to this is to just use this great line that I love, which is, I know you're busy, so I don't want to take up too much of your time, but can I just ask you one more question before things wrap up, or before we wrap things up? Okay, it's a great line. It's not offensive at all. A lot of people are worried about being too aggressive because they're kind of, like I said, the junior person in this meeting, and they don't want to be calling the shots, so to speak. But this way, all you're doing, first of all, you're acknowledging that their time's important, and you're not ending it right away, right? You're saying, can I get one more question in? So it's a great way to do it. I highly recommend using it. And if the meeting's going well, end it on a high note. People remember how things end, not the entire discussion. So if things are going well, that doesn't mean try to stretch it out for as long as possible. And the very last thing here, tell them you'll follow up. Super important. You want to follow up on LinkedIn. When you do follow up with them, or sorry, tell them when you're going to reach out to them. I'm going to reach out to you, tomorrow to follow up or whatever. And in that LinkedIn message or email or whatever, make sure you follow up with any promises made on either side, right? Did they ask you for your resume? If they ask you for your resume, then make sure you include your resume when you follow up. did they tell you that they would follow up with you and tell you who the captain is for your school? If they did, then when you follow up, ask them, remind them, right? Hey, like as you mentioned, you were going to let me know who the captain was for Queens. Could you let me know? So you want to make sure that anything that was discussed and promised in the meeting is included in that follow-up message to keep the conversation going. So those are kind of the my key points with regards to informational interviews. Um, any questions on that, guys? Everyone's good?
Jay, hey, I had a question.
Yeah.
So from Waterloo, I'm not sure. I don't think there's like, staffers and school captains. So in that case, if there isn't any like anything like that, then like, what's your best approach in like reaching out? Do I just do what you did with the LinkedIn stuff, or like, is there like another approach I can use?
So yeah, it's still going to be exactly the same. I tell you, we'll have like the staffer is responsible for everyone, right? But the captains are responsible for each school, um, and most of the banks will have a Waterloo person. If they don't, it'll be Waterloo blended with another school or another set of schools. But there's still going to be a captain that's responsible for your resume. Okay? So you
Okay.
still go through exactly the same process, and you can just use that exact question which I mentioned before, which is, once you meet, so you're going to use the LinkedIn process to talk to anyone, and then you're going to ask that person who's responsible for hiring students from Waterloo. That's the key
Oh, okay,
question.
okay. All right, makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, and that the name they give you will be, the captain that you need to find.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on some guys? No. Okay. Okay, beauty. So the last section here is just like my proposed action plan for you guys. So like I said, there's no follow-up on this stuff. It's different from the other workshops where you're going to have follow-up with me and one of your team members. This is all on you, but this is just, what I think, this or some version of it will go a long way to, significantly increasing the odds, ultimately getting an interview, which is the networking. So, it's mid-July. The basically early recruitment's around a month away, and full-time, standard recruitment's going to be a month and a half. So you've got to basically you got to start quickly. It's the time to get going, and you can't be reaching out to all these people the day before applications are due because they're just not going to meet with you at that point. So on slide 27, I got my proposed action plan here. This is for each of the each relevant city that you're applying to in Canada. Tomorrow, go out, use the tools that I mentioned. So use LinkedIn or leverage your existing connections and people to reach out to 2 associates at each of the big banks, at each of the big 6 banks. Okay. If you have their emails already, you can do that. And otherwise, you just want to follow the steps that I mentioned for LinkedIn. And by Friday, look into all the bulge bracket banks that operate in your city or in your target city. So the bulge bracket I'm talking about, big international banks that have regional offices in your city. So Morgan Stanley or Goldman or whatever, and into boutiques. Okay, so find out what exists in the city that you're interested in applying to, and start to get some, looking into someone to contact from those places. And for the boutiques and bulge bracket guys, you can be a little bit more flexible. So don't necessarily just target associates, but you can do analysts, associates, and even VPs. It might be a really small shop. So if you narrow it down to associates, that might just be one person. So it might be limiting it a little bit too much. And in the email that I sent today, I included a little networking toolkit, which is great for recording all this stuff. So recording who you reach out to, whether you heard back from them or not, etc. And for Toronto, I also have the vast majority of the banks that operate in Toronto listed there. It sort of goes by size, so the big 6 guys are at the top, and then it kind of goes down from there. So you can definitely use that to as a starting point for who you should be reaching out to. So once you've done that, early next week, just review who's gotten back to you, and if you haven't heard back from someone at a given bank, reach out to more people. So if you reach out to 2 people at RBC tomorrow and you don't hear from them, reach out to them again on Monday, or sorry, reach out to 2 more people from RBC on Monday, and you're basically going to keep repeating that. So every couple days, reach out to someone else until you finally set up a meeting with someone at each bank. And to the extent possible, do the same thing for the boutiques and the bulge bracket guys as well.
Jay?
Yep.
So if someone doesn't get back to you, does it make sense to just email them again a couple days later, maybe a week later?
Yeah, you definitely can, and it might just be that they're really busy, and so they didn't have time to respond, and then you just kind of rejogging their memory. You said email, so if you do have their email, that kind of presupposes that you have some connection to them before. So in that case, I would definitely say yes, you should follow up again. And on LinkedIn, I think I'm actually not sure, but you might have to cancel your request and then send it again. But there's definitely no harm in doing that. But I would, even if you do that, so let's say you send a request to someone, 4 days has passed, and you're gonna resend it to them, I would still reach out to someone else too. So don't stop the process of reaching out to someone else after a few days, but you can do what you described.
Yeah. Well, just if they didn't reply, you email them again, and would you just email the same thing, assuming they didn't see it, or would you kind of be like, hey, emailed you before, didn't reply, maybe you're probably busy, something like that?
So again, if it's LinkedIn, your blurb's probably not going to change because it's literally like 100-character limit or something. So you can't really differentiate it. If it is an email, then you should absolutely say, hey, don't want to bother you, but just wanted to check up to see if you got my last email. I'd love to meet.
Cool.
And I'm guessing you don't go past another, if you tried a second time, you probably don't want to do a third time, right?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I'd go with 2. I mean, if you do a third one, I would write something like, hey, I don't want to bother you, and I won't reach out again, but I was just checking in one last time to see if you got my previous emails and were willing to meet, so that you're definitively closing the loop, right? You're not leaving it open anymore. But that's sort of how I would think about it.
Okay, cool. I also wanted to ask another question. So if wouldn't we want to tweak up our resumes and cover letters before we reach out to them, just in case they are interested?
Yeah, it's a good point. For the most part, these aren't going to lead into them asking for resumes right away. It's early enough that they're not necessarily focused on this. If you do hear from someone, because I know that the issue here is that we're doing the resume cover letter stuff in 2 weeks' time, right? So if you start going gung-ho crazy on this stuff, and you end up meeting with someone and they do ask for your resume, then I'm happy to sort of check in with you and go through it and make sure that everything is gung-ho before you send it across. But remember, this stuff does take time, right? You're going to be starting to read, if you're following my plan, which is aggressive. You're going to start to reach out to people tomorrow. They're going to get back to you, sometime in the next couple of days, maybe, right? Then you're going to meet with them. They might not be the person that wants your resume. That might be the captain, in which case you have to set up another meeting. So there's likely to be a little bit of a lag. But like I said, if you do run into an issue where you're concerned, just let me know and I'll help you through.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
Any other questions, guys, on any of the stuff that we covered tonight?
Yeah, I had a question actually. So I've been to some recruitment events. So for example, CIBC. I know that there was some HR recruiters there. Are they in any point helpful in this process, or should we not focus on them?
My view is that the HR people are almost of no value to you. Just the way the hiring works with investment banking is that they just don't trust HR at all to pick people, and so they pretty much do it all themselves. The only time it's helpful is to get data from, like, when are the jobs going to be posted, or when do I have to apply, those types of things. That's the stuff that the HR person is responsible for, or that can be useful for. But other than that, they're just not going to get you a job. They're not going to be the ones that, screen your resume. There's no HR screening that's done before it goes to the captain or whatever. So yeah, generally my advice is your effort are spent elsewhere.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Because I actually had a call with the HR recruiter from CIBC, which she was part of the investment banking recruitment. I guess I don't understand what her job is now. But some of the comments that were made since she wanted to kind of review my CV for me, they were really off, and she didn't know what a DCF was, and I was like, "Are you sure you're recruiting for investment banking?" So, which is why I'm asking you this.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, and that's part of it, right? No VP is going to take the word of an HR person who doesn't know what a DCF is, right? So that kind of justifies my logic there. All
Yeah,
right, guys.
precisely.
What's that?
It says precisely. Thank you.
Oh, no worries. All right. Any final thoughts, questions? Everyone's good? Okay, guys.
One more
Yep.
comment. I think in order to connect everybody together,
Yep.
I mean, we also are gonna be having these we're all team two, right? So we're gonna be communicating together, right?
Yep.
But what we should do is pretty much maybe everybody add each other on LinkedIn, kind of connect there, and see our network grow there as well, and then we can get some maybe feedback on our LinkedIn as well, which would help because I'm guessing the process nowadays is also looking on LinkedIn, see what we have going on there as well, right?
For sure, for sure, it's a good idea, and there's a lot of value to be realized from this program from each other. So to the extent you guys are connecting and learning from each other outside of these workshops, I think that's really helpful. That's connecting on LinkedIn and just even writing a message on LinkedIn and getting used to doing that is all going to be helpful for you when you start reaching out, and just the stakes will be lower than we're actually reaching out to people in the industry, right? All right, guys.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
All right.
So there's
Thanks,
no,
Jay.
oh yeah, no worries. So if you guys no more questions, we'll wrap things up. And thanks a lot. That's workshop number one, and look forward to talking to you guys in 2 weeks' time.
Perfect. All right.